Now I'd like to start desensitizing him a little bit more around his head. Up to this point with the plastic bag, we've really been sticking to his body, making sure that we can flap it around his body without too many problems, you know, whack the saddle with it up and down his flank area here, okay? He's pretty good with his body. We haven't done a lot around his head, but he's ready for that now. I don't flap it around their face until they're good with their body. Get their body good first, and then worry about their head, okay? Lots of it, slapping that saddle with it, up and down their flank here, up and down their body. Righto. When I go to do their face, it's pretty simple. I just start scratching their imaginary head. I just stand out here and I just start scratching them here. And then as they get quieter, I just put the stick on them. And I just scratch them like the bag's not even there. I just scratch them with the stick. Just pretend the bag's not even there. And that'll make you not sneak around the horse. See how his head's up now? I wouldn't want to take it away now. Now when he relaxed his head just a little bit there, that'd be a good place to retreat and take it away. So start scratching his imaginary big head. Start out here, and then as he gets quieter, bring it in closer. Okay, so step one is just make sure you can scratch the bag all over their face. See how I'm kind of at a little bit of a side angle here in case he'd strike out. He's not going to get me. Okay, retreat. Do it on this side. Okay. A little bit of reactiveness there, so keep shaking it, keep scratching here. I'm scratching his head right now, even though I'm not really touching him, now I am. Just keep scratching anyway. Now see how he lowered his head just then? That'd be a good place to retreat. And do it again. Okay. That's a boy. So he's decent with this. I wouldn't say he's great, but I think I can move on. Now I'm going to just start flapping his face with it. Okay, and if he throws his head up, I just keep flapping it over his eyes here. Now be careful that you don't hit him with the stick. You're just flapping the bag against their face. You're not touching them with the stick. And it's kind of like a bit of a flicking motion with the stick. There. Now I'd like his head a little bit lower, but at least he kept it still, so I retreat and rub him. Now usually if you do their head after their body's really good, it doesn't take much to get their head really good either. So he's doing pretty good here. That's a boy. Then retreat. The head's usually the hardest part, so leave that until the body's pretty good. If I'll stand here and let you flap their face with the bag, usually putting the hackamore on or bridle's not that big of a deal. Okay, change sides a little bit, make you move that front end across. This is his worst side because of his cut on his face. So this will be good for him on this side. Try to keep their head tipped a little bit towards you anytime you can. I certainly, at the very worst it could be straight. I certainly don't want it tipped away from me because that means the hindquarters can come towards me. Jumping up and down beside the saddle. A lot of it. Good boy. I love that there. Good boy. Retreat, rub him. Okay, so pretty much now it's just keep building on it. Keep getting that horse to where he'll accept more of it. You can flap it higher and louder. Okay, a little bit of resistance there. Keep his head tipped towards me. Lift it up higher in the air. I want him to be able to stand here with his head bent and flexed a little bit while something's moving up above that saddle, because that's what I'm going to be doing when I'm riding him. Retreat and rub him. Good boy. See right now, I'm going to jerk on him a little bit now, use a little bit of driving pressure. If I pick up on that halter and he feels a little heavy there, I'm going to knock on him a little bit and say, get off that. This would drive there, that's better. Always ask for steady, but if he feels heavy at this point, I'm going to knock him off it. Bump, bump, bump. Good boy. That's a boy. Some other little head shy exercises you can do. We already did some of this in the turn and go and turn and draw, is just getting that rope around his head. He's a lot better about this. Remember, he was a little bit flinchy about that rope being flicked over his head. He didn't like that, did he? Now he's pretty docile to it, isn't he? Okay, that's because I've been practicing it in between all of my groundwork exercises. Okay, start to do a little bit of act like you're flicking water into their face. All these exercises are on their fundamental series towards the end, extra desensitizing. Okay, make sure you review them in detail. That's why the colt starting series goes along with the fundamentals, because you know, we're not going into a lot of detail on every exercise on this series, because you know, you should, by this stage, you should be pretty familiar with my method and how we do it, and you've also got the fundamental kit to go back to. Okay, use those arena mates with the arena mates that are already in this series. Okay, that's it. Flick it here, act like you're flicking water into their face. He's a little bit jumpy here, so I keep doing it. I wait till he quits moving his head that much, relaxes a little bit, like right there, and then retreat and rub him. I love to see if I can make my horse get scared or get spooked. The more you try and scare them, the less scared they get. Okay, and then wave your arms around, act like you're going to backhand them. Okay, don't hit them, of course, but just act like you're going to knock their eye off, and then just rub them. I want my horse to say, you know what, you are the least scariest person I've ever met. You couldn't scare me if you tried. And the only way they get like that is to rub them, is to try to scare them. Use approach and retreat. When they retreat, rub them. Okay, good boy. Once he's good either side, do one hand and the other. 1, 2, 1, 2. I always did one side at a time and stood at a 45-degree angle in case he tried to strike or rear up. Good boy. Rub. A lot of them like to be rubbed over their eyes like this. Okay, pretty good there. Pretty good. Point. I'll show you a couple other things you can do with them. Another little trick that I like to do to a mate is get them used to a dressage whip banging against that saddle and moving in the air, because when you move this quickly, it kind of makes an unusual noise that a lot of horses will react to and get a little frightened of. So I want to make sure that he can handle that swishing noise around his head here. I like to do especially a lot of it whacking the saddle. You'll hear me do a lot of this when I'm starting colts, making sure I can beat that saddle and have that colt. I love that. See how he's standing here with his head tipped at a 45-degree angle? There's some slack in the rope. He's nice and relaxed. Retreat. Get in closer to him and whack that saddle with his head bent. Okay. Even though he reacted really well to it, this is the first time I've done it to him, but it's still something that I want to check out. Retreat, rub him. A little bit more reactive on this side, not much. When your horse will stand there with their head bent with this slack in it like this, that's a really good sign. Beat that saddle. That's where you're going to be sitting. Believe me, when you've done all this extra desensitizing exercises and you get on them for the first time, you'll have a lot more confidence riding them because you know you've done your homework. Good boy, I love that. Good boy. Okay. Keep his head tipped. Retreat and rub him with it. Retreat and rub him. Prepare every colt that you ride as if whoever's going to ride them for the first time is a rank beginner and they can barely stay on a horse. So if that was really the case, you'd be saying, man, I better make sure this thing's quiet, otherwise this city slicker is going to get bucked off. Good boy, he did great. Now, mate, we're going to start introducing Ransom to the hackamore and do a couple little exercises in preparation for getting him ready to ride, okay? Basically, I like to use a rope hackamore like this for anywhere from the first, say, anywhere from 10 to 14 rides. Somewhere in that time frame is how long I'll use a hackamore for, okay? Can you use a snaffle bit from the first ride onwards? The answer is yes, okay? I've done it many, many times, okay? I just think that you get a better result if you start your horse on a hackamore first and get him laterally bending and flexing with a hackamore, and then get all that stuff pretty good first for the first 10, 14 rides, and then transition into a snaffle, and I find that it's a lot better result. The only time that I probably wouldn't use a hackamore first is if I've got a horse with a really big head on him and Roman nosed and real heavy and dull and just real belligerent, then I'd probably just go ahead and start him in a snaffle right from the beginning, because a snaffle's got quite a bit more leverage or bite to it than what a hackamore does. So I need a little bit more leverage to get his head bent around and get kind of control of his feet, but that's more of an extreme case, okay? Now, we've been doing a lot of preparation up to this point. of making sure that we can rub over his ears. Okay, we've been practicing this from the first day. Remember the first day when we started going over his ears here a little bit, back and forth with the rope, okay, swinging the rope around his head, okay, back and forth. All this is all in preparation for getting him ready to have something go over his head for a hackamore or a bridle, okay? So we've done our homework here a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take the halter off and put it around his neck. That way I've still got a little bit of control. If he went to leave town, I can pull on him and get 2 eyes. Okay. Get his head tipped towards me here. Okay, that's a boy. See here? I want to tip that nose towards me here. Rub, rub, rub. Let him know I'm coming. And I want to go smooth over his ears. Okay, I don't want to get it hung up to where it's pulling on his ears a lot. Okay, when I first put it on. These kind of Mustangs have got a hell of a head of hair on them. Okay, he's having a bad hair day from the day he was born. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and do it up here. I like these hackamores that I'm using here because they have a rope nose band. They're a little bit stiffer. I find that the horses don't lean on them anywhere near as much, and they respect them quite a bit more. You can use a softer rope, but you'll find that the horses will lean on it more. Now I'm going to loosen this up a little bit. I don't want it real high on their face. I like the hackamore down a little bit lower on their nose, because the lower it gets on their nose, the better leverage you're going to get, okay? Too high up on their face, and it's easier for them to pull against you. Now I don't want it so low that it's interfering with his breathing, okay, but just this is the soft part of his nose here, and then just as it forms on that bridge, on that bony part, that's where I'd like to sit it. Actually, I might just go up a little higher on this one side. Okay, about there would be good. So now I take my halter off. Okay, so what I want to do here is just get him used to, first of all, flexing with the reins, okay, get him comfortable with the reins. Anything's different on a Mustang. They notice every small little change, okay? So I'm going to start out by just flexing him a little bit here. It's a little bit different feel on his nose, okay? That's it. Pull and release a few times. That's the boy. Make sure he's comfortable with that. The better you get them flexing on the ground, the better they'll flex under saddle. Okay, that's a boy. There we go. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to tie one rein up here to the horn. I usually just make a couple of half hitches here. Make sure it's loose enough it doesn't pull on their head. And what I want to do here is I want to tie this to his tail and get him to teach him to follow his nose a little bit here. I'm going to try to turn him on an angle so the cameras can see here a little bit. About there, okay. Basically, a good little test is if you can't slide your hand down their butt and pick up their tail and move it around, they're not ready to ride, okay? So we've already prepared a lot of that by sliding off the back of him with the human curry comb, okay? So we've already got him kind of used to this a little bit, okay? So what I'll do is I'll lay this rein over his tail like that. And then I fold their tail in half. And then what I do is I bend their head around and I take it around and over, just around and over. And now I'm going to pull it back through this little loop here that I've created. It's basically just a half hitch on his tail. Okay. And they'll initially move around. Just keep flexing them here and following them. I just follow them here. There we go. Okay. And what that does is it pulls against itself, it tightens down on their tail. And then I just tie a few half hitches in the rope to get the slack out. And I just want to have him to walk around here a little bit and just pull on himself a little bit and get used to having something direct his nose a little bit. Now I like to tie it to their tail for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it gets them used to something behind them. If you can't touch their tail or pick up on their tail without them overreacting, they're certainly not ready to ride. And number two, their tail has got a little bit of give to it, as far as it's not just a dead pull. So if they would pull against it, it just doesn't, lock down hard, okay? So it kind of, if they pull against it, it'll pull on their own tail. Now you notice initially, I didn't put a lot of bending in, did I? Just, I don't know, a little less than 45 degrees, okay? You never want to do this to a colt until they're flexing pretty good, okay? A lot of people will think this is the answer to shortcut, okay? They'll say, okay, this is what you got to do. You got to just, you know, you don't have to worry about flexing. You can just tie their head to the tail and that'll get all the hard work done for you. That is not correct. Only do this once the horse knows how to flex and soften. This is just an added bonus to that. Okay, so see, he's kind of spinning around here by himself. I'm just going to leave him be here for just a second. He's got to figure out that he can actually stand there and bend his head and neck without moving his feet. So I'm just not going to put any pressure on him right now and just kind of leave him be. Okay. I wouldn't want it any looser, that's for sure. It could probably be a tad bit tighter, but you're always better off having it a little too loose initially than too tight. Okay. That's the boy there. He's just got to realize he can stand there with his head bent without moving his feet. And this just kind of gets him used to following their nose a little bit and learning how to give and find that feel of that pressure before I get on him. Now I'm going to go move him around a little bit. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. I use the fear of the bag, if there's any there, to initially move them. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. I'll move them around, then I'll back off. Sometimes, you know, they will get dizzy initially and maybe fall over, no big deal. They just untie it and they get back up again. But I just move them around for say 20 seconds and then stop and let them find that stop again. But this is a good little safety precaution, because if you got them bending and softening to their tail like this, when you get on them and you flex that and bend that head around, if they resist you and go to throw their head up or take it away from you, you've got a little bit more leverage on them, where it's going to be much easier to bend their head around and get yourself out of a wreck. So I'm just kind of waiting here for him to stop and relax. Now usually if they're pretty quiet, they just stop a lot quicker. He's kind of a little bit unsure of how to keep his feet still and bend at the same time, which is why we're doing this. There, I like that. He's keeping his feet there. See him bend just then? Notice that when he bent his head then, his tail went straighter, didn't it? That's where he's finding his own relief. That was really good what he just did. I love how he's got his leg cocked there. So I'm going to go move him again. And I like to do this in the round pen to where they can't get running away from me too much. Notice that he's always turning into the fence. Okay, like he's turning in there. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. I like to break each end up. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. When he gets dull to the bag, then I'll use the stick to make him move. Hindquarters, forequarters. Now once he gets stopped again, I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up a little bit. Okay, now that I know he's not going to overreact to it and rear up and pull on it and all that kind of stuff. And if you've done your homework right, they won't want to do any of that stuff. If you just take the shortcut, here's the shortcut. Somebody says, right, we don't have to worry about any of that groundwork stuff. We'll just tie his head to his tail and stand back, boys, and see what happens, okay? That's when they'll rear up, flip over backwards, break their neck, all kinds of crazy things, okay? Do not do that. Do your homework, and then when you do this, after you've done all your groundwork exercise, it really is beneficial. But I will tell you up front, if you try to take shortcuts and do this before they're ready, it won't work out very good. You'll only have to come back and redo it anyway. Okay. So I'm going to undo these half hitches here. And I'm going to tighten this up some more. Again, you just lay it over their tail, fold their tail in half, and then shorten it up to what you need. Throw it over your rear. I'm going to try to have him stop where the camera could see, right about there if you'll stand still enough. Throw it over your hand. Don't get your hand caught in here though. So now I've thrown it over and I'm going to go back through this hole here. And I'll walk with them when they do this. If they run too fast to where they pull their head away, you know, they escape you, just drop it and start again. Now I'm going to pull it up tight. Stay in close to them. Stay in close to them. That's it. And I just get the access rope and tie a couple of half hitches. Now that bent his head a lot more there, didn't it? Now, I never want to tighten it up so much that he can't get away from it. He's always got to feel like he can win. Okay? That's good. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters. Move each end of the horse around. See how he's opening his mouth? He's pulling on that a little bit now. That's good for him. See, he's bracing against that there. He's got to learn to soften and move his feet. This is the first time we're asking him to flex and bend and maintain moving his feet at the same time. It's quite a bit harder than just flexing when they're standing still. Watch him give to this. He's leaning on it, and watch what he does. He'll pull against it, and then he'll create a little slack. Pull against it and create some slack. There's a little bit of slack. He's pulling against it. See, I want him to pull on it a little bit and realize that pulling doesn't mean softness. The only time he creates softness for himself is if he bends his head more. There we go. I like that. Got his leg cocked. Put a little bend. He's got to get a little bend there. So once they get the hang of standing still, it'll go a lot quicker. Now I'm going to go move him again. Eventually I want to get him to where he doesn't move away from the bag at all. Okay, so I'll start flapping him with it now a little bit. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. See how he's braced up here? He's got his mouth open. He's kind of pulling on this hackamore. Well, that'd be my arm. If we don't do this on the ground, that'd be my arm under saddle. So I want to get that resistance out of him. Okay, and go move him again. So I'll usually do this to them a couple of times before I ride them, just to make sure that they can move their feet and create some bend at the same time. See, I like it now how he's getting a little lazy, and I can tap him with the bag and the stick and he's not kind of overreacting. A little stiff here. And that's all right. That's why we do this, to get that stiffness out of him. See him just fight it just then? That's why I do this, so that when I get on him, if I don't get this stiffness out of him on the ground, I'm going to only find it when I get on. He's pulling against it here. And the good news is when they pull against it, they only pull on their own tail. So pretty soon they figure out if they don't pull on themselves, it doesn't pull on their tail. There, I love that. See how he just created his own slack there? Okay, go move him again. Hindquarters, forequarters. See how lazy he's getting now? He's almost getting to the point where I'm going to have to start using the other end of the stick to make him move. Okay. I like this when he gets so quiet that he chumps me, just like that there. Right then he said, "You're not going to hit me with that bag. I don't need to move from you." I like that a little bit. That's it. Okay, I'm going to tighten this up just a fraction more, but I kind of do it in stages. Tighten it up here, and then you pull it down on that tail. But again, don't tighten it up real tight to begin with. And that's probably about as tight as I would make it right there. His nose is about 90 degrees. I want to make sure that I can touch him all over his body with that bag and that stick and he don't overreact. Okay, he's kind of fighting against it right now. I just kind of keep tapping him here. I'm just looking for those "oh no, don't touch me there" spots. He's really pulling on that, isn't he? Well, guess what? That'd be my arm right now. See, don't be fooled just because you've got them flexing really good with their feet still, but they're going to soften and bend when their feet are moving. Often they won't. When I say won't, they'll be stiff and heavy. So that's why I like to do this. See him leaning in on this here? There, good. He just got off it just then. That's good. He's pulling against it now. There, he got off it again. So I like it when they'll just stand still and let me flap them with the bag. When he opens his mouth and all that, that's just him showing resistance. That'll all disappear once we get him soft. That's a boy. I don't really flap their head with it much until I've got their body doing really good. So now what I'm going to do is he's kind of getting dull out of the bag, is crunch the bag up and use the other end of the stick. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. Move that front end, forequarters. Hindquarters. Move that forequarters, forequarters. When he struck out there a little bit, he's just saying, I don't want to have to move my feet and soften. I don't really worry too much about that. See him sticking his head down real low. He's thinking, I wonder if I can just lower my head and get out of this rather than bending. He's got to kind of experiment with that a little bit. There, I like that. He softened up there. He licked his lips. Good boy. There, that was a good give. I might go and flap him a little bit here. So before I ride them, I want to make sure that they'll move their feet around in a circle, soften to that hackamore. I can whack the saddle, shake it up above the saddle. Okay, they're real confident about this. Under their belly here, behind them. So again, please don't take this as a major shortcut to your groundwork. This works great if you do it with your groundwork. It doesn't work very good in replace of it. The horse has got to understand how to win. If he doesn't understand how to win, it won't work very good. What do I mean by win? He's got to know how to at least soften and yield. Forequarters, hindquarters. Come on, move those feet. Forequarters. See how it's getting a little stuck here. Okay. That's the boy. If I don't want to get too close to him, he's kind of getting a little stuck with his feet. So I'll use the string. That's it. There. When he moves his feet, take that pressure off. And he's acting pretty normal for the first time of doing this. He's a little stiff here, but that's why we do it, to get those kind of stiff spots out of him. There, I love that. He just bent just then. That's it. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters. Come on, hind. Move that butt. There. That's better. Forequarters, hindquarters. Forequarters, hindquarters. Back away and let him soften to that. If you don't get rid of this resistance on the ground, you're only going to have to get rid of it under saddle. As much as I can get rid of problems on the ground, it just makes it much easier under saddle. There, see him soften? Oh, I love that. Good boy. There we go. That's a little freer there, isn't it? See him freeing his feet up? There. That's the boy. That was a good one. That time he didn't fight too much. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is just let him kind of what I call soak on this for about 10 minutes, okay? You'd be amazed if you just give him a little quality of time to to bend and soften to this by themselves, you'll be amazed how much better they learn, okay? So I don't want to do it so much to where he's exhausted. I'm just trying to get him to understand. Soften to your nose as you move your feet. And so I'm going to let him soak 10 minutes and then come back and do it on the other side. Where people make the mistake is they leave the horse checked around like this for hours on end, or leave him there all day. That's not what we're talking about. That doesn't do any good at all, because the horse just gives up. I want him to learn how to bend and soften, and just leave him there for 10 minutes and then change sides, and it works really well. So we've let him soak now for 10 minutes, mate. I'm just going to go up to him now and just flap him a little bit before I untie him. I love to do a lot of flapping with this bag, up around the saddle, on his hindquarters, get him used to all this before I get on him, okay? He's doing great. And don't be surprised, you know, some horses will have a little bit of a hissy fit about it, and they'll paw the ground and get their knickers in a knot when you check them around like this. That's all right for them. They got to go through a little bit of that to figure out that, you know what, they're only pulling on themselves, okay? That's it. So I'm going to undo it here. I'll flex him 2 or 3 times now. There we go. That's the boy. We'll change sides. Okay. Now, I'm probably going to do this up just a little bit higher. It's a little bit low on his nose. So I'm just going to go up a little bit higher. Just tie the rein up to the horn like that. Double it, the tail over. Just fold it in half. Okay. And just go around the tail. Through that half hitch there. Through that gap right there. What I like about it is that it pulls down kind of on itself. First time you do it, it's not real tight. New side, new brain, just kind of ease into it. That's the boy. Just let him figure that out a little bit there. When I first check them around, don't put a bunch of pressure on them. Just kind of let them just figure it out just a tad bit. There, he stopped moving his feet. There, softened a little bit, like that, licking his lips. So we'll go ahead and move him around now. Again, I like to use the fear of the bag, if they have any, to get their feet to move. And once they get kind of dull to the bag, you know, you can just use the stick and string. 4/4, hindquarters. 4/4, hindquarters. 4/4, hindquarters. 4/4, hindquarters. So that's not real tight there, and I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit more once he stands and relaxes here. I'll snig it up a little tighter. You're better off always having to stop and tighten it up slightly than tie it too tight and get into a wreck. Now, if I walk up to a colt and they start getting a little snorty or jumpy about it, I'll just go move my arms around a little bit. Go make them move from that fear of my body. There we go. I'm going to tighten this up. I'm not worried about him, you know, rearing up or doing anything silly right now. Never hurts to tighten it up a couple of times, especially on the first day. After the, you know, first day onwards, then I can usually tighten up to what I need it to be. I want to start moving him around now, getting him to soften as he moves. Hindquarters, 4/4, hindquarters, 4/4, hindquarters, 4/4, hindquarters, 4/4. Eventually, when I shake that bag, that'll be his cue to actually stop. I'll show you that in a minute here. But initially, I use the fear of the bag, if I have any, to move their feet. When they stop, don't move them straight away. Let them stand there for, you know, 10 seconds and just let them kind of feel like there's a little reward there when they just stop moving their feet. you know, if they go around for say more than say 45 seconds, I'll just go ahead and move them again. So kind of like saying, hey, if you want to move, come on, let's move. Use a little reverse psychology, and it doesn't take very long. And they don't want to move. See, he's getting to a point now. See how he's getting a little dull to the bag here? Okay. That's what I call a nice problem to have. He's not really wanting to move away from me with this bag. There, I love that, him bending and softening a little bit there. Oh, I like that when he bends there. So now what I'm going to do is scrunch the bag up. And if I need to use the stick to move his feet, hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters. Now I'm going to bring the bag out and flap him till he stands still and relaxes. So now the bag's going to be the good part of the day. Whenever he hears that bag flapping and sees it, that's going to mean rest. Initially, I can put him up against the fence a little bit like this and use the fence to help him figure out how to stop. See how he's backing up here? He's kind of pulling on that hackamore. Okay, there we go. Flap him here a little bit. Now I just back away. It doesn't take them very long to figure out when you start flapping that bag, that's their cue to stand still and relax. Fold the bag up in my hand. If I get too lazy, I might have to get the stick and string out. Hindquarters, forequarters. If they're real touchy, I'll go ahead and let that string rub up against their, have the stick touch up against their ribs here a little bit. And I'll kind of tap them all over and just get rid of that, any jumpiness in them, to where they just kind of get a little numb to me. Okay, bring it out, start flapping it. That's his cue to stop. But you don't want to start this until they're pretty numb to the bag. That's it. Lots of it up above this saddle. I'm going to step back and let him relax a little bit. This is the retreat part. And you know, they will fight it a little bit, and I don't mind that. I want them to kind of figure out that they're only pulling against themselves. Hindquarters, forequarters. Hindquarters, forequarters. I'd rather them pull against themselves and get rid of that on the ground than be pulling against me when I'm riding them. Flap them here. I love that. As soon as I started flapping, see how he's leaning on this right now? That's eventually what he's got to not do, is he's got to be able to stand here while I flap the air and flap the saddle with his head bent. There, soften up to that, please. Okay, go again. Get the stick out. Move that hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters, hindquarters, forequarters. Now flap him till he stops. Rightio, I'm just going to let him soak on that for about 10 minutes, and then we'll undo him and he'll be just about done for this session. Now, when I first do this to a horse, I always like to tie it to their tail. The main reason is their tail has got a little bit of give to it. Like if they kind of really pull against it, it's not going to like lock down on something solid to where they kind of hit it and might want to rear up or flip over. Their tail kind of pulls a little bit as they pull against it. Plus, when they pull on their tail, it makes them feel a little uncomfortable. So they quickly figure out when they bend their head, they don't pull on their tail. When they pull against it, it does pull on their tail, okay? So I'll do that for sure for the first day, maybe even the second day as well. Tomorrow I'll show you a couple other ways you can do it. You can tie it up to the back of the saddle or to their hock, and I'll show you that tomorrow. But I won't do that in the beginning. In the very first session, maybe in the first two, just tie it to their tail, and when you do that, usually you don't run into any problems whatsoever. So we're just going to let him soak now for about 10 minutes. Just let him wander around here, give and release, and pull against it a little bit and figure out how to get off him. And then we're going to come back in, unsaddle him, and do a couple little desensitizing things before we finish him off. But again, don't let him soak on it for more than 15 minutes at the most. Somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes is plenty, okay? And then do it a little bit every day, and after a couple of days, you'll be amazed how they'll start to soften and move their feet at the same time. Now, mate, we've let him soak for about 10 minutes. I want to go and uncheck him now. Before I uncheck him, I always make sure that I can flap this bag around him without him moving too much, okay? Let me show you something else. If you approach them and they're kind of worried about it, I'll just get my arms and flap my arms like this and use the fear of my body if they're frightened of me. Like he's a little bit moving around here, so I'll just go flap my arms until this doesn't bother him anymore. Use whatever they're frightened of to move those feet, okay? You can also just kind of put yourself between, make them go between you and the fence and use the fence to help keep them still. That's better there. You know, get it to where your arms don't really bother the horse waving around. Use that fear. If they want to move around, use a little reverse psychology and make them move. But before I uncheck him, I'd like to be able to flap him with this bag just a little bit and make sure he's comfortable with this. He's not worried about it. A lot of it up high here. Shake the bag. Good boy. I don't want to get around in that position up against the fence in case he do something silly. Always make sure that you've got enough room to move your feet if the horse reacted badly. See here, move his feet here. There we go. Hey, I love to be able to just wave my arms and not have the horse react to that. I'll soften him up with my hand. As I uncheck him, I always try to keep one hand on the rein and get them to flex a little bit and soften as I'm undoing it off their tail. I don't want them to just pull on it and then, it releases off their tail and then to think that pulling on it's what got rid of you. Okay, flex him here a little bit. Good boy. So for his first session of that, he did pretty good. Again, don't be discouraged if you've got them pretty good about flexing and they're giving pretty good, and then when you go to actually check them around and make them move their feet and soften, that they revert back and get a little stiff on you. That's quite common in the beginning. That's why I like to do it, so that they get used to moving their feet and having to bend all at the same time. I'm going to put this around his neck in case he reacts badly when I take the hackamore off, so I don't want him to get away from me. Always be thinking ahead. If something doesn't go right, did the horse get away from you? Did something bad happen, and what can you do about it? So I always, presume the worst and make the horse prove to me he's good. That's a boy. Rub him, prepare him a little bit for this to come over his ears. Okay. That's it. Smooth like that. That's a boy. He's doing pretty good here. Get his head tipped towards me whenever I'm putting this halter on. From this day on, I want to make sure his head's tipped towards me at a 45-degree angle. I don't want to put it on with his head tipped away. That's a boy. So I'm going to go and unsaddle him now, and I want to do a little extra desensitizing around his legs. Okay, because in a few more days I want to start picking his feet up, but I've got to do a little bit more preparation first. I'm move him over here. That's a boy. Before I take the saddle off every day, I always reinforce flapping those stirrups, pulling up on that back cinch, making sure he's comfortable with it, jumping up and down beside the saddle. Okay, make sure that he's not worried about this saddle being moved around him. I do this until I'm black and blue in the face, until they are so bored with the stirrups and the back cinch and me jumping up and down, they're just bomb-proof. That's a boy. Especially flapping with their head bent. Now when I start taking the saddle off now every day, I'm going to throw the saddle on a few more times, just on both sides, and be a little bit more obvious about it and just getting better about saddling it. Anything I want to practice extra, if you do it at the end of the session when they're a little bit tired and using the thinking side of their brain and they're kind of wanting to stand still, you'll find that they'll react a lot better to it, as opposed to doing it when they're kind of a little fresh and you know, you've got them working them straight out of the stall. Okay. Get that head tipped towards you. Any side you're on, that head's tipped towards you. Okay. So a couple of things here. I just want to be a lot more obvious about throwing this saddle pad on him. Okay. Making sure he's comfortable with that. On both sides. Do tons of this, just throwing it at him. It's pretty good with that. Okay, I like that. And I'll practice just throwing the saddle on him without the saddle pad, just getting him used to having that saddle go on him. Moving it around here. Okay. He's a lot better about that. That's a boy. Very good. Now, I want to work on a little bit of extra desensitizing with his legs. I want to start picking his feet up, but before I can do that, I've got to be 100% confident he's happy and relaxed about just things touching his legs here. So I'll use approach and retreat. Initially, I just use the stick and I rub up and down his legs here. Start up high and work your way down if you need to. If he started moving around right now or getting worried about it, I just keep rubbing it. As soon as his feet stop moving and he relaxed, I take it back up to his withers. So just get the horse really comfortable with your stick touching him. If he would kick at this, you notice I got his head tipped towards me. I'm up by his shoulder. He's not going to get me. Okay, people ask me all the time at tours, they'll say, well, Clinton, I can't pick up my horse's feet, or he's bad around the farrier. Step one, if you can't even touch your horse's leg with the stick or your rope, don't even think about trying to pick it up. Okay, and usually I'll do all 4 feet from one side, then change sides, make that front end move across, do the other side. Okay. And I like to do a lot of the feet at the end of a session because he's a little bit tired now, so he's not really wanting to move around. Don't work on the feet when you first bring him out of the stall. Now, today is day number 6 with him, and this is the day, now I'm really starting to kind of focus on his legs a little bit more. Up to this point, I've just kind of randomly been desensitizing, but now I'm doing a little bit more obvious towards his legs, okay? By this stage, we've already done tons of this. Remember when we first started doing this, he would kick at it, wouldn't he? Okay, remember the first day when that rope got around his back legs, he'd race around kicking at it and having a bit of a hissy fit about it. So he's a lot better there. Okay, so these are like little extra things you can do to him. I want to stand back here and start moving it back and forth here, making sure he's comfortable with that. Oh, there's a little tickly spot right there he kind of reacted to. Okay, so make sure that he's not worried about this. Now let's say he started moving around. As long as his head's tipped towards you, he can't outrun you, and you just keep seesawing it back and forth until he relaxes. So I use the rope. Now back legs, I usually just swing it up like this and let it swing back between his tail like that, between his hind legs, and then I use my foot and I pick it up. Okay, Remember, he's got to prove to me he's quiet. I'll do it on the other side too. Move it back and forth. Okay. Move it up his leg here. I've got his head bent towards me in case he went to kick it or do something silly. That's good there. Pretty good there. I can even pull it up a little bit and release it. Pull it up and release it. Pull it up, release it. Pull it up, release it. Pull it up, release it. That's a boy. Okay. Change sides. A little bit of, move that front end away. That's a boy. Same thing here. Just get them used to it. Usually the lower you go down on their leg, the more sensitive they are. So step one about horses' legs. First of all, don't even think about trying to pick up their feet until you've got pretty good control of their feet moving forwards, backwards, left and right, okay? Don't even think about trying to pick their feet up until you can move the rope all around them, okay? Get his head bent. He's a little heavy here. Move that hindquarters. That's it. Soften here. I use my foot in the beginning because I don't want to stick my head down there in case he reacts badly. Once you broke in a few wild Mustangs and had your head kicked off a few times and you've been run over, struck, maybe chased you down, bucked on top of you, you'll get a little smart about this stuff. Okay, make them prove to you they're safe. That's the boy. If you always assume that, you know, if you're in the wrong position, what's going to happen to you, that something bad could happen, you'll never get caught by surprise. Okay. Pull it up and release it. 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 Good boy. Okay. So from here, he's handling this really well. I might go and start rubbing him with my hand a little bit here. Usually when I start touching him with my hand, I have the rope on the outside of me because that puts a little bit more bend in him. Okay, a little bit of approach and retreat. Rub, rub, rub. Then go back up where he's comfortable. Rub, rub, rub. Okay, so I do the same thing with little baby foals. Now, if he would go to move around, I would try my best to keep his head bent towards me like this and keep rubbing him. As soon as he stopped moving his feet and relaxed, I'd go back up to his withers again. Okay, so once he's good with one hand, I can use two. That's a boy. Now do his back legs. Get his head bent here. That means his butt will go away. Rub, rub, rub. Okay, go down his leg here. Then down a little bit. I'm not even thinking about trying to pick his foot up. I'm just rubbing him here. Okay. That's a boy. That's a boy. Keep his head bent. There we go. Usually when I want to start picking them up, I break it into steps. I don't even think about trying to pick that foot up for 2 or 3 days. I just get him good with this. Good boy. Once he's good with one hand, I like to vigorously rub him. He's pretty good with that. Back leg. Get his head bent towards you. Okay, that way I turn my back to him. So if they would kick me, you know, my face is away more. Okay. They might kick me in the ass a few times. That's not going to hurt as much as getting kicked in the teeth. That's it. That's a boy. That's a boy. See, do this when they're using the thinking side of their brain, not the reacting side. That's a boy. Good boy. So I'm going to do this for the next couple of days and not even think about trying to pick his feet up. Just get him comfortable with me touching him. I do that for 2 or 3 days. When I actually go to pick him up, he's not going to have a worry in the world. Where people run into trouble is they want to pick the foot up when the horse is obviously not comfortable with you just touching the foot or the leg. Okay, if you can't touch the leg with the rope and stick in your hand without him feeling defensive or worried, you're never going to be able to pick the foot up. So break it into steps. You know, when people would bring me horses in Australia that were bad with the farrier and kicked people and you couldn't shoe them and all this kind of stuff, I wouldn't even think about handling their feet for about 2 weeks. I'd do nothing but groundwork for the first week. Then the second week I'd ride them and do groundwork. And by the end of the second week, then I'd start messing with their legs. And you know how easy it was? About like this. Not a big deal at all. They never kicked, they never struck, they never give any problems at all. Because most feet problems are not really feet problems. Again, I keep coming back to it, don't I? They're symptoms of a cause. It's either lack of respect or fear, or sometimes both. Get the fear out of them. Get the horse respectful and using the thinking side of their brain, and then a lot of the problems just disappear. See, I love this here. See how he's dozing right here? He's got his kind of eyes shut here. He's just relaxed. I love this. This is what I call a broke horse. 6 days ago, he was snorting, and when I stood in the round pen, he's racing around like he's on crack. Okay? 6 days later, you know, he's a lot more relaxed. He's quiet. This is what I call a broke horse. A horse that is just nice and relaxed and calm about being around you. See, I like this place to quit Ransom here today. He's nice and quiet, he's relaxed, you know, he's dozing off here, standing here beside me, kind of falling asleep. You know, a lot of people say, well, they want their colts to have a lot more spirit and play drive and all this kind of stuff, okay? I have a little saying. You ever notice that, put it this way, I have a little saying, a tired horse is a good horse. I've never seen a tired horse give anybody any trouble. Okay, but I've seen fresh horses, I've seen horses that are overfed and underworked, I've seen horses that were disrespectful, buck people off and get people in a wreck every day of the week, okay? But I want my horses to be quiet and relaxed. Have you ever noticed that when your horse is kicking up his heels and feeling his oats and have all that spirit and play drive and all this kind of stuff that people talk about today, have you ever noticed when your horse is doing all that, you're usually not having a very good time? You're usually hanging on for dear life. Okay, so it ain't real funny when you're on a colt and they're feeling their oats, okay? That's the biggest trouble what people do with starting colts is they usually overfeed them and underwork them. The horse is feeling too darn good off that feed and not enough miles under his feet, okay? I've never seen a tired colt give anybody any trouble, but I've seen fresh colts and overfed colts and horses that were sorry and disrespectful give people lots and lots of trouble. So yes, is he a little tired right now? The answer is yes, and I like that. You know, Gordon McKinley used to tell me when he was a boy in Australia, they would go on these big droving trips, okay? And there'd be, say, 10 or 15 guys that would go out on a droving trip for 2 to 3 weeks, and they might gather up 3,000 or 4,000 head of cattle, and they'd have to drive them, you know, 10 days to the nearest railway yards, okay? And to, you know, for the railway yards to come in and trains to pick up the cattle and so forth. This is before, you know, motorbikes and helicopters and everything they use now. And he used to tell me where they used to break these horses in the day that they left on these droving trips, okay? And he said in the morning, you'd open up the stockyard gates and horses would be bucking and rearing and there'd be a big old dust pile out there and cowboys' hats are flying through the air and everybody would wave goodbye and these 15 guys would go down the road and it'd look like a disaster. Everybody's everywhere, okay? And then they come home 14 days later and they got their leg over the horn, slapping the horse on the butt. The horse's nose is that far off the ground. He's like an old broke dude ranch horse. And he told me they used to have a little saying, you leave on a young one and you come back on an old horse. You leave on a young horse, but you come back on an old one. And he used to tell me it wasn't that their methods, you know, 60 years ago were that good. In fact, they were terrible. But what got those horses so quiet was the workload, was the sheer miles under their feet. They rode those horses 14, 16 hours a day. At night time, they were hobbled or tied up or sidelined, and then they'd ride them again another 16 hours the next day. Okay, and doing that for a couple of weeks, it just got them broke. Well, the good news today is the techniques that we're using today are so much better than what they were 50, 60 years ago. But if you can use the better techniques plus putting miles under their feet, now you got the best of both worlds, okay? But again, a tired horse, I'd rather a little bit tired a colt than one that's full of beans and feeling his oats, because he'll get you into trouble every single day of the week, okay? So he's done really good. I'm happy with him. He's quite calm. You know, 6 days ago, he's a lot wilder and he's a lot better now, okay? And he's just going to keep getting better and better as we keep working with him. So I couldn't be more happy with his progress, and we'll just keep showing you how we keep moving through the method, mate.